All right. I saw the timer going yellow, so I was like,
There you go.
uh-oh.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that. These are always fun, and I find it always really difficult when I start these. And a guest will say something like, "I want to talk about that," but then I have to remember there's a 5 minute timer going. So I did take some notes as far as your comment around worst movie. Doesn't matter what it is. I immediately had a movie come to mind, Dracula 3000. Probably to date the worst film I have ever seen. Do you have one of those? Is there something that hits your radar of like, yes, you watched it, but man, you wish you could get that time back?
I cannot remember the name of it, but it was like, yeah, these like young celebrities, they were in space, and it was just one of those movies that the picture on it looked like they put some
Yeah.
effort into it. The preview made it look good, but it was literally the worst acting I have ever seen. And I was like, I don't think I can finish watching this. I'm gonna have to look it up and send it to
That
you. It was
might be
really
Dracula
atrocious.
3000 because it was in space.
There you go.
It was just such a
Just
weird movie. Oh,
just awful, awful.
that's amazing. Yeah, so your comment on the industry trends or the unexpected industry trends, I think is I don't necessarily say is a hot take, but like when you started to lay it out, it makes a lot of sense. And I think I saw it a lot, like a lot of, security is almost table stakes now, but still a lot of people aren't doing it, right? It's just like a lot of
Yes.
times it's get things out to market. And I think as we see it go on more and more, people are getting called on it, and they're getting called on it with breaches and hacks, right? Where it's like, oh, we forgot to do proper, bordering or role-based access control, and someone's running a plex box on the system, or like there's kids playing Roblox on a dev box that has VPN access back to the like little things like this. And sometimes it's all like just speed to the market, like how do we get out there first to be the first to do it. And if they don't build with security as the foundation and then bolt it back on, it's always a problem. Matt Lee
It
could
is.
could probably speak more to this way more than I could. It's definitely his vertical, but yeah, like,
But it's weird to me because it's like it's important,
yeah,
right? But also people are using it. I feel like a lot of orgs are using it as a way to drive revenue too, right? So,
hmm,
yes, security is important. We need to secure whatever our product is, whatever we're doing. But
yeah,
then I think a lot of companies say there's opportunity there. So not only will we secure our product, but I'm going to give you some SKU to go bill people, and or I can bill you as an MSP
yeah,
for this security offering. And to me, in some ways that's good, right? There's more options. People are thinking about security, but
hmm,
in some ways that's really scary because you have this company that is trying to do security to get revenue, not because they should be doing security, you know?
yeah. And I think especially when you approach it from like a product standpoint, like if I bolt this product on, I can sell it and make an extra $40 or whatever, and that's the wrong approach, right? Because it means whatever technology you're bringing in maybe isn't the right fit, and you're just doing it because maybe you don't know what you're rolling out, and you just got your sales got sold to, and you're moving with that. So I think as a service provider, your overall offering should be right what you lead with, and the tools in which you do that is really just for you, right? I've had conversation with some MSP in the past. A couple MSPs is like, don't put the products you use on your branding, because the second one of those products is no longer the top right Gartner quadrant or becomes compromised, you now have to answer for that. You can't silently swap out and keep things optimized on the back end. It also makes it
Yep.
very difficult when you have to go for a price increase because you adopted a newer technology that is way better, but then they're like, well, I thought we were already protected. You know, means to an end. And I think that goes back to, one thing you could tell an MSP is focus on selling, focus on what you're going to sell, your service, sell your MSP, not the products you're using, right? Because there'll be
Yeah.
somebody else out there using those products as well. Also, it
It's
gives,
so important.
yeah,
Yeah. And for like you said, from the sales perspective, I don't want to be tied into any product, right? I should have healthy enough margins.
mhm,
I should be able to have flexibility and choose what's best, right, for my customers and for my
yeah,
MSP. But the hard thing, like it's so hard for MSPs. They have 50 different, 100 different
yeah.
security vendors. They
Flashing
kind of do
lights,
same
just come
things.
check it
Yeah, it's
out.
like
Yeah.
what do I do? And and security has to be their main focus. Their insurance rates are
Mhm.
going up. They're worried about getting breached. They've heard of their friends who have like,
Yeah.
it's so hard. It creates all this noise for them.
It's also, the weird skirting ground between being an MSP and an MSSP, right? So it's like, where do you kind of draw the line and then find partners? And I ended up seeing like a very interesting slide. I think actually Rob Ray might have showed it off as like the evolving market in the last 3 years, and like a whole bubble called MSSP that didn't exist like 4 years ago in any real capacity is growing. And I think, there's this pit that managed service providers just like, let's just bolt on an extra S and let's differentiate ourselves. And it's just like, a Windows Server administrator being like, wait, I got to know how to do all this extra stuff now, like this SOC compliancy and all this extra stuff. I'm like, man, I just reset passwords and like do domain controller promos and stuff. So, it's this, I feel like it's very much because our industry has been heavily unregulated. Like there is no real benchmark for what's a good MSP. And it comes back to like, a trunk slammer, right? If I showed up and fixed the problem and then left, but I didn't fix it, I band-aided it. Like, does that make me a good tech? Does that make me a good MSP? There's always someone that's going to come in and poke holes in somebody else's work. What makes you good? Do they see your process, your procedures? Do they see all the effort you went in to build this holistic package, the training? No, they just see like probably the cost per seat at the end. And did I get hacked? Yes, no. Right. So
Yeah, exactly. Like everything seems okay, but they're like the customer that's buying it, right? They've already said I don't understand technology. That's why they have an MSP. So it's scary. Most of these buyers are very uninformed, and that's why it's so hard to be an MSP. The barrier is very low to enter, right? I go start an MSP tomorrow, go buy a bunch of products, and if I'm better at sales than the better MSP with better processes, I'm going to win the deal, right? Or my prices are cheaper or whatever.
Yeah. And that was it. Like you'll see some on the flip side, you'll see like some very, very technical people, like to your point, like I just want to play around with the tech, but they're also doing disservices to clients. It's this weird, like you got to thread the needle, but I've seen organizations that like just can't sell when it's in the best interest of the client as well, where it's like, look, you need to sell them on this backup. You need to sell them on this because if you don't, you're assuming the risks in this all you can eat plan. And then when the client says no, they're like, oh, okay. And then a ransomware event happens and you're eating 80 hours of your own personal time to solve it because you couldn't sell them on the technology that protects you from that. So it's the nature of a technical person generally, or someone that starts an MSP is like, we want to help. Like I never saw someone be like, I want to be in an MSP because it'll make me money. It's like, I want to help people. And I've fit this Venn diagram where I think I can do it at scale and grow, but it's hard. It's hard. There's a lot of aspects to it. Right. So,
but that's why it's hard. Cause a lot of times they start it. I want to do the tech stuff. I can do it better than the other person. I can help people. And then you go start your MSP. And after 6 months or a year, you're like, I need money. And this is a lot harder than I thought with the business side. So it turns into that. And I think like, that's why my advice was that, cause if you are at that point, right, and you say, well, really my goal now, like I started it for a different reason, but my goal now is for the sales. It's a lot easier when the customer says, we don't want to adopt this. Like, no, I'm not going to work with you. You're not my customer anymore. Like, of course you want their money, but it's easier to say no.
Right.
Yeah,
like
but you got
firing
to
a client because it's putting you at risk. Right. And we'll usually take that risk on as an MSP or as a, a helper. So like, you know what, this one's on me. I'm sorry. I'll take it. It's like, well, to what end? Yeah, it's a very. I think that's why we're kind of seeing a shift. And I was out in Edmonton, Alberta last week, and we met with a bunch of MSPs out there, and I found out that they all knew each other, and they had this group that they would actually communicate. So even though they were in the same geo region and were technically competitors, they didn't see it that way because they realized very much it was a community. And I think if we can see that shift globally, where it's like, look, we're competing with each other, but we are all stronger by working, and we don't get driven to bankruptcy if we hold together, right? If there's always someone down there ready to run the dollar down and be like, I'll do it for $10 cheaper. I'll do it for 10. That helps nobody, right?
Yeah.
The business will go out, the client will get compromised. It's essentially like outsourcing or offshoring and just going bottom bidder. Never works out in the client's favor in the long run.
No, you can make some short-term money, but that also helps like those good MSPs that are like that, right? Stop and reduce those trunk slammers, those people that can, build an MSP out of your basement, because
Mm-hmm.
you're all saying the same things. Like when I was at my MSP
Yeah.
and I knew I was competing against like 5 others, I'd be like, actually, these 2 or 3 other guys, they're really good MSPs. These other two, like, these are some
Yeah.
things you should look at, like say it nicely, obviously. And that helped all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it helps the industry elevate when you have this unregulated industry.
Yeah, exactly. How do you know who's the best of the best, right? And a lot of
Yep.
it's word of mouth, and that's great, but like you got to stay on top of that. That changes constantly. So I think if a trend I would like to see continue in our industry is collaboration among competition, I suppose, right? Like
Yep.
it's you'll even see it among distribution, right? Like
Yeah.
I've got a lot of people that I communicate and work with that don't necessarily work at PAX 8 with me, right? And because we all experience the same things, in the end, we're all in this servant mode of like helping people grow and protecting and growing everyone's business. And there's more than enough pie to go around generally, right? So I'm hoping it's more of a help and elevate as opposed to like dominate and stomp out. And I feel like we're starting to make that shift because you can't do it all on your own, right? You can't.
No.
I think the whole reason why I started this side gig, whatever you want to call it, this podcast thing, is because what I was taking for granted is like, oh, of course everyone knows about this. And then I realized no one did, because there's so much info flying out at any one point. Unless you're hyper focused in a specific vertical, at a specific thing, you never find out about it. Right? Like,
Oh yeah.
you and I and like Tony, we've shared emails back and forth being like, hey, did you see this? I'm like, holy cow, I missed that. And it changed the way we approached things, right? Like the Citrix price increase the other day, right? Like that, I stumbled across it and I think, hey, this might be interesting. How are you supposed to keep tabs on this stuff, right? So I think collectively we are much stronger. So awesome.
Yeah, and the one thing I noticed too, like there's some more of these like MSP events. I feel like there's too many MSP events probably in general, but I feel like there's a couple of these that are more like that community focused. They're less like vendor driven, and I think that's like could lead to something pretty strong in the future. It's hard to keep that because same thing as MSP. You start out with this community event, and then you realize you can make money or you have more costs because you have to grow it. So it's very difficult, right? It's not easy, and that's why not everybody's doing it.
Yeah, it's skirting the lines because obviously we run our own, right?
Yep.
Runs our own.
Yeah, us too.
Yep. But I think the very important thing about those is not chasing the dollar. Like, they are self-serving. Like, it'd be ignorant to say they're not. But I think that the industry at large can really spell when you're disingenuous and when it is a sales play. And you will see this. You'll see large conferences of old, just be like, I'm not getting value from this anymore because literally it's just a vendor showcase at this point, or it's just like a sales pitch. Like, what did I get? What was the value? And a lot of times you'll ask people, it's like, so what did you get? It's like, I just love coming and hanging out with all my friends again, right? Like, vendor or people I've been working with in the industry. So it's like, all right, so like you have found a business expense to go down to like Florida or Denver to just hang out,
Or
right?
Dominican,
right? So I think we're overlooking what makes those conferences important, and I think selfishly, like PAX 8 hasn't lost sight of that, and hopefully we'll maintain that cadence. We're very people focused, partner focused, and I think the second we miss the mark on that, you'll be sniffed out, right? It's
and that's why our orgs get along so well too, because I feel like we think very much the same way. It's about helping the MSP. Hopefully will use us. Hopefully I provide the value. But when I go to an event or hang out with the PAX 8 team, it feels like I'm hanging out with my friends and we get to like talk about fun stuff and it doesn't feel like work. And that's what you want, right?
Yeah. We work enough, so having a little fun time is great. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. We could keep going. Maybe we'll offline these movies chat at the very least, or when I see you at one of your Nerdio camps. But thanks again for joining me, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.